Welcome to Residential Tech Talks. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Executive Editor of Residential Tech Today. Joining us on this week's podcast from Chanhassen, Minnesota, is my longtime friend, Pete Baker. He's Managing Director of the Baker International Group. The BIG Corp, as it's known, is a global sales rep and business development agency providing support to some of the finest brands in consumer electronics. Prior to his current gig, you might remember Pete as a custom integration business early in his career, business owner, and then more familiar was his time as VP of Sales and Marketing at Remote Technologies Incorporated, where he spent 12 years building the RTI brand globally, positioning the company as a world-class leader for control, automation, and distributed audio solutions. Pete's a great proactive leader. He's worked with companies on a lot of development challenges, getting them into the international markets that they need to be in. Plus, he's literally got one of the brightest smiles in the business. Pete Baker, my friend, thanks for joining me today on the podcast.
Jeremy, thank you so much. It's great to be here with you. It was great to see you just a couple weeks ago as well.
Absolutely.
Always fun to chat with you. So thanks for having me on this great podcast.
Thank you. I was, we were both in San Antonio, Texas at the ProSource Summer Conference, the first big in-person event. I think there was a international or a security conference that was the week prior. So that technically was one of the first ones, but this was one of the first custom integration type events. And we were there all being brave in person for the first time in about a year and a half. And it was just great to see familiar faces and talk to each other. Yeah. And I appreciated that you had listened to the podcast or seen parts of it and would be willing to come on and talk about your career and your current endeavors and just get caught up as friends, because that's the kind of podcast I love the most.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, we've gone back to your RTI days and had dinner many times together at Cedia's and some of the best steak places that I've been to with you. And you've always been such a great host at those things. And I've literally been to your house in Minnesota, which was really cool because
yes, during a snowstorm.
That's right. That's right. We got so carried away kind of walking through the RTI gear that was installed in your home that your wife finally gave you like the stink eye, came over and said, "You've got to let him go to the airport.
Yeah,
he's going to miss his plane.
He's going to miss the flight and then really be on the naughty list." So
that's right.
Yeah, thanks to my wife.
Oh yeah, that was great. But yeah, so I kind of wanted to talk about where your career has taken you, really almost chronologically. I don't always do these interviews like that, but I want to talk more about your consulting and your work with the BIG Corp sort of later in our interview. But if you could just kind of give us a little background about how you got into the tech business, because you started off as an integrator. You owned your own integration business for 5 or 6 years. What led you into that? I know few people know this, but you grew up in a very unique place. I'll let you tell that story. But how do you go from being an islander type of guy to being a tech guy?
Right, that's a good question. So I did grow up in the Bahamas. I was born as a Bahamian. My dad was Bahamian, and my mother was from Minnesota. And they met at a college function because my dad went to undergrad school in Minnesota, believe it or not, of all places. They didn't really have universities in the Bahamas, and he befriended one of the monks in the Bahamas that happened to go to college in Minnesota. And so that's what brought him here. So I grew up in the Bahamas. I still, very closely tied to the Bahamas. I actually have dual citizenship, and we still have a little store there. So if you're ever in the Bahamas, I'll throw a quick plug in for A. Baker and Sons, our little family shop that's still on Main Street in the Bahamas.
I saw that Facebook post recently. Wasn't sure. I didn't get through all the comments to see that was still in operation. So is that like a haberdashery or what is it?
Yeah, so it's my dad or my grandfather immigrated from Lebanon to the Bahamas of all places. I wrote an article about that. If you ever want to read it, it's on my website,
Okay.
uh, and you can look at that. I think it's "Sail Towards Future Success," I think is the name of the article. So on the bigcorp.com. But he immigrated from Lebanon when he was very, very young and ended up in the Bahamas. And he had a little cart with some dry goods that he just would push up and down the street in downtown Nassau, and eventually saved enough money and started up this store. So they sold, kids' clothes. We still sell kids' clothes and hats. And my dad was a barrister, so they sold a lot of the wigs and regalia that you need to wear when you go into trial.
Oh,
And then just some souvenirs and things like that. So it's a cute little store. We're very proud of it. It was started in 1894, I believe, is when my grandfather started the store. So it's
hmm.
still going strong to this day, even through COVID. So
Wow. That's great.
yeah,
What a great
it's a
heritage.
cool little shop. And then we moved back and forth until I was about 10 years old, and eventually settled back in Minnesota. And I got into consumer electronics because I had a friend that worked at a electronics retail store, Dayton Hudson, now has become Macy's.
Hmm.
And he was working there. He was selling stereo equipment and speakers and TVs, and he would often have customers ask if he could hook it up
Mhm.
for him, if he could hook up the speakers and the stereo equipment. And he said, "Well, we don't really do that here. This is 30 plus years ago,
Yeah.
but maybe I can get my friend to help me, and we can come over after work and hook up the equipment for you." So he would contact me because I've always been a pretty handy guy. And we'd go over to the house and figure out how to hook up the stereo equipment. And eventually he had so much business that he started up his own integration company. And then I eventually went to work for him and other integration companies over the years, and eventually started my own integration company called Custom Home Integration. And at that point, I had to get licensed as a low voltage technician and as a low voltage contractor as well. So I had to take the test with the State Board of Electricity, and spent a lot of time on lots of job sites over the years, cutting in a lot of speakers and wiring up a lot of houses. Even though my primary role was really sales and project design, I still had a lot of that firsthand experience wiring up the homes, and that has absolutely helped me in my career in different roles because I understand from firsthand knowledge what it's like to wire up a house, or
Right.
trying to finish up a project and running into issues and having a homeowner, right over your shoulder saying, "When are you going to be done?
Yeah.
What's taking so long? And why are you still here? And why isn't it working?" So I have, a full appreciation for what integrators go through on a daily basis. And, unfortunately, the integrators are very often the last people in.
Hmm.
And at that point, the homeowner, they're very often over budget. The project has gone on far longer than they expected, and here we're trying to rush in and assemble, this crazy science project and make some magic happen.
Sure.
And very often there's a lot of pressure that's put on the integrator, and I understand that and appreciate that. So when I was at RTI, I led the tech support team and the customer service teams, and really understood what they were going through, and also when they're receiving those phone calls from a frantic integrator saying, "I got to get this working."
Right. Yeah. So it doesn't sound like it was inevitable that you went into tech integration. It was just sort of a chance thing with your friend, but once you're in it, you did it for a while, but maybe the fact that you weren't an integrator for a long time before you went to work with RTI kind of tells you that maybe that there was something bigger that you wanted to do or something else beyond just the
Yeah, well,
integration.
actually, I was an integrator for 20 years, so there might be a little misunderstanding
Oh,
there.
right. Okay.
I
So,
was an integrator for 20 years
okay.
working for different companies, but I had my own AV integration company for 5 years.
Got
So
it. Okay.
so I did do that for a very long time, and I can remember still, Jeremy, to this day. I distinctly remember when I first started in the industry, and I was working in a showroom for one of the first companies I worked for. That I would literally be pinching myself, saying, "I can't believe I'm getting paid for this.
Hmm.
This is just so cool." Because I always loved the technology, and I had so much fun back
Okay.
then, and still to this day, I still can't believe that I actually get paid to do what I do, and that I'm part of such a exciting and fun industry.
Well, not to make assumptions, but I'm assuming you went to college.
I did go to college. I didn't finish college,
Okay.
but I did go to college
What did you
for
study while you were there?
3 years. I studied international business.
Oh, well, that worked out well for a
It
starting
did.
point.
So I've always had an interest in that, and maybe it's because I grew up basically as an immigrant. I
Hmm.
was born in the Bahamas, even though my mother was a U.S. citizen.
Right.
So I grew up living in a different country, and driving on the other side of the street and all that kind of stuff.
Right. So then take us through your time there, your dozen years at RTI, and again, that's where I got to know you. When you came in, you said you were working some tech support and things like that. It was a pretty young company at that time when you joined.
Yeah. So I was good friends with the founder and owner. John Dembski was a very good friend of mine. He's since passed away, sadly, but he was a great friend of mine, and certainly a great mentor as well for me in business. And I was working for an AV company at the time that went out of business, and I still had some clients that were like halfway through the installation process, and so I started up my company, Custom Home Integration, to take care of some of those customers, and then also went to work at RTI part time at
Okay.
the same time. And John needed someone in sales, and back then there were only about 5 people in the company. It was a very small company.
Hmm.
So John and one of the other owners, Kevin Marty, who was more the software engineer. John was more of a hardware engineer, and the CEO, of course.
Yeah.
And then there was someone in accounting, someone in the service department, and also shipping. That person did both. And then there was me, part time. So I really did all the back then. I did all the sales, all the training, all the tech support. All wrote all the copy for all the magazine or the brochures and
Mhm.
advertisements and press releases, all those kind of things. And then also, did the customer service and tech support. So I remember distinctly to this day, one day when Kevin walked into my office with a big smile on his face, and I said, "What's up?" And he said, "I just transferred all the tech support calls to you."
Oh no.
Yeah. So it was a very, very interesting time, and it definitely was trial by fire and on the job training. Doing tech support, or writing the brochures. I remember John had a red pen, and when I would write the copy for the brochures, he'd scratch out things and circle it with the red pen, and it was like submitting the paper to the teacher or the principal.
Yeah.
But eventually I would get them back without any marks on them, and I thought that I learned a lot in writing, and as you know, Jeremy, I've written a lot of articles for you over the years.
Yeah.
Uh, we've done that, and so it definitely helped me to get better at that craft. And also just such an amazing experience. And that's really why I left the role as an integrator and then eventually went to work for RTI full time, was because it was just, really exciting opportunities, not just with, the business development at RTI, but also I love the marketing aspects. I've always been, passionate about marketing. And then also the international business opportunities.
Yeah.
That was one of my, I guess, legacies at RTI. I had a fantastic U.S. sales team and had a fantastic, fantastic teams eventually that we built out over the years. So, Brett Stuckey in the marketing department, who very well, was, just exceptional. And a lot of the great members of the sales team, training teams, customer service and tech support. I mean, they really made us look good. And honestly, RTI made fantastic products, still makes fantastic products, but I would contend that one of the main reasons why our business skyrocketed is because people loved working with the people at RTI. So many great people there. And so I had a great U.S. sales team, but we really didn't have any international exposure whatsoever. And so I really focused on developing that business. I traveled extensively to all these international markets. I've always been pretty technical, and especially with my background as an installer. And I created Advanced Control University and wrote out the whole course curriculum for RTI back then. So I knew the content pretty well, and I would deliver all the international trainings, at least initially. When we would hire an international distributor, I would train the trainer and train the team and conduct, dealer trainings all over, Europe and Australia and New Zealand, really all over the world, the Middle East. And so by the time I left, RTI products were available in over 120 different countries. So I'm pretty proud of that legacy. And when I left RTI, I felt that there were other companies, other U.S. manufacturers that were in a similar position, that they were very strong in the U.S. but hadn't really expanded internationally. And so that's where I came up with the concept of the BIG Corp, Baker International Group, is to help U.S. manufacturers expand their global footprint. Mm-hmm. And I really felt that it required more than just having a sales rep or hiring a sales rep, that you needed more than that. And so with the BIG Corp, we really focus on not just sales representation, but also supporting efforts as well, with marketing, with training, business development, strategy, customer acquisition and retention programs, all of those different elements that help to fuel success in sales.
Well, we will continue talking about the BIG Corp and some of those activities, those endeavors. But first, Pete, we are going to take a short break for a commercial.
Great.
Did you know that 34% of broadband households are concerned about the air quality inside of their homes? Parks Associates' new quantified consumer study, Fresh Air, Air Quality and Comfort in the Smart Home, addresses consumer concern regarding indoor air quality, as well as interest in air quality products and services. Our research of 10,000 broadband households finds that about 20% of broadband households are likely to purchase a smart climate or indoor air quality device in the next 6 months. This new consumer analysis quantifies concerns, perception of product value, and purchase intentions. For more information on Fresh Air, Air Quality and Comfort in the Smart Home, contact sales@parksassociates.com.
Welcome back. I'm talking with Pete Baker, Managing Director of the Baker International Group, otherwise known as the BIG Corp. Pete, as you were starting to explain about what BIG does these days, I'd like to first note something you said in some of the materials you sent me, that after working at RTI for 12 years, you left and launched this rep and business development company at the age of 50, which I can relate to because that's how old I am now. And you said brave, stupid, or brilliant. I think that that it was probably the perfect culmination of your experience there. And one of the things I do remember is when we would connect at Cedia, you would have I believe this is where you would have your global partner summit. Typically, you bring in all your international partners at RTI. So that was such a big thing no pun intended with big, but it was such an important part of what you were doing. I remember that. So international plays into so much about what you do now. What is it that you think companies maybe don't know that you start to work with as clients, that you can kind of bring that wisdom and experience to them about that international effort? Are a lot of these companies that just have focused mostly on US so far, and they just don't know what the next step is to get into the international business world?
Yeah. So going back to the Global Partner Summit, that definitely was instrumental, and that was something that I'm really proud of. And as you know, Jeremy, just like we're sitting here talking today, you and I are good friends, and it's a relationship business, and
Yeah.
so especially I would say internationally. I mean, certainly in the United States, I have very, very good friends in the industry like you and other people that I've done business with over the years. But internationally, it's very common as you develop those relationships where you're invited to dinner at someone's home.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of did that here. I did the Global Partner Summit and launched that. I can't even remember what year it was. Let's say around 2010 or somewhere, give or take a year. And we would kick things off at my house, and I would actually physically cook for everybody with a bar. I'd host a barbecue, and I wanted a real authentic American meal.
Okay.
And so we'd have steaks on the grill and corn on the cob and a very Midwestern kind of meal, and just had such a great time. And then we would, after that, then we would have several days at the headquarters where I'd bring in various members of the team, from tech support or customer service or training and so forth. Certainly, the owners would be involved as well, talking about product development and concepts. And it was hugely successful. And so I'd kind of roll right in from that description into answering your question that I think it's important for U.S. manufacturers to understand how intimate those relationships are internationally. That you really do become very close business partners and friends with the people that you do business with. And I think that the closer you become, the more dedicated and passionate they become about that brand. And so with international, I think it's very, very important to invest in those relationships, spend time one-on-one developing those relationships. But I also look at it, any of the brands that I work with, I will say, for instance, one of the brands that I represent now is Savant. And so I would say to an international partner, let's say if I hire someone, a new international distributor, I would say, I'm an expert at all of the benefits and understanding everything that has to do with Savant. My job is to train you so that you become an expert at Savant.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's not just acting as a sales rep. I need to go beyond that. And so my job is really to give them the tools and resources so that they can be effective, so they don't have to develop that on their own.
Right.
Obviously, Savant and all the brands that I work with, they have great training teams and marketing teams. Of course they do. But I can also kind of custom tailor that for a specific market. And so we create a lot of marketing materials within the BIG Corp and share those resources like email blasts and brochures or product catalogs with our international partners. And same with the training materials. I just talked with someone today, and it was a Savant, someone who works for Savant, and they said, "Hey, by the way, I was talking with a dealer in Canada, and they showed me one of your training videos and said, "Hey, check this out. Have you seen what this guy does to market and promote Savant?" And so it ends up getting used by the company that I work for, the materials that we produce, but also definitely other channel partners as well.
Right.
So, I work very closely with the team at Polaris Controls, for example, and we exchange, resources as well.
So do you have to adapt to different parts of the world? It seems like there are certain similarities between, let's say, like in Australia, in the way things are done there. That's been the story I've always heard because of the construction style of homes. But then you go to
Yes.
the UK and it's a totally different animal because there's stone walls and things like that. So you have to adjust some of what you're doing per what country you're dealing with, I'm assuming.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I do, and it kind of is tied back into the relationship aspects that we talked about previously, but any country that I go to, if English is a second language, I do the first part of my presentation in that local language. So, I'm not fluent, obviously, in all these different languages like Russian or Hebrew or Arabic, or German, French, Spanish, so forth, Afrikaans. But I study and rehearse over and over and over and over again. Like I remember when I went to Russia to study and rehearse for that, I actually was dreaming, reciting the thing in Russian during my sleep. So that's one of the, one example of how I adapt, and also how I show respect to that local country that I'm in, and their local language, and it really means the world to them. I mean, it really, really does. Even if I am not perfect, which I'm sure I'm not, though, when I'm reciting that beginning of my presentation, but it just shows some respect. And then certainly each one of the markets have different, cultural characteristics, and just, I think most importantly, just taking some time to understand that market.
Sure.
And show that you're really trying to learn about the market, and ask some questions about what's the construction style like, and what's the sales process like for you, working with the dealers, and what are the things that they're most concerned about, or what are some of your challenges or threats, weaknesses, strengths, and opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And just trying to gain an understanding of those different markets and being sensitive to that, rather than just blowing in like a bull in a china shop, and trying to force your an American style on them. I think, one example that I would give that's kind of a strange analogy would be in France. I'm half French and half Lebanese, and I love France. I love going there. I'm very passionate about the French culture, and very often people will complain. Americans will complain about the French being rude to them.
Right.
I've never had that problem. But whenever I'm there, I show some respect, and at least know some of the common pleasantries like hello and goodbye and thank you. And once you do that, it really makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And so, that's one example of how you can make some changes and try to adapt to those different cultures.
Well, you mentioned working with Savant, another automation brand, for lack of a better term. Obviously, they do a lot more than just automation, but that's their core, which is similar to what RTI was like. But that's not that's not the only type of company you've worked with, and with the BIG Corp. What are some of the other product category manufacturers that you've represented?
Yeah, well, I'm very proud to have worked with a lot of fantastic manufacturers over the year. Currently, some of the brands that I also work with through the BIG Corp would be Russ Sound, which is just such a great company, and such a veteran in our industry, especially for distributed audio and I just think of Russ Sound as, such a classic example of a CI manufacturer, because they've always been involved in the CI space. They've always been passionate and dedicated to the CI channel. I love the Russ Sound RCI program, which protects dealers so that any of the RCI products or amplifiers, if somebody tries to sell it on eBay or something like that, you won't be able to really power it up and use it unless you have RCI credentials, Russ Sound certified installer credentials. And then it's super easy. Once you're on the network, you just type in your username and password. It unlocks that device. So, they're a fantastic brand. Also, Nexus 21, based in Arizona. Very proud to be working with Nexus 21. And really, a lot of the brands that the BIG Corp represents, I think, are leaders in their given category. And as such, they have exceptional warranty periods, like Nexus 21, 10-year warranty on their motorized products and concealment products. And I think I always like to find products that are unique as well and add value. And so Nexus 21 definitely falls into that category where if I was still an integrator, I would talk about Nexus 21 and motorized concealment products with every single prospective customer, because it just is a way to differentiate. If everybody else is selling static wall mount brackets or articulating arm brackets or something like that, and I'm coming up with a creative solution, and even not just looking at the audio video elements, but look at the concealment elements for coffee makers and toasters and spice racks and things like that. That's really, at the heart of what we do.
Yeah, that's the
integration.
That's the magic.
Yeah, that's really the magic. But I don't think people talk about that stuff enough. And I always tried to find unique solutions that I could offer to prospective customers. And I would drop those throughout the entire sales process like little breadcrumbs. And if they picked up on one of those things, just one of those things, like a motorized, lift for a toaster or a coffee maker, and they went, I had clients all the time that said, we're going to go with you, Pete, because you thought of more creative solutions than anybody else that we met with. And so I can't stress that enough for those of you listening to this podcast. Try and find ways to differentiate from your competition.
Right. Absolutely. Well,
and then let's see. I don't want to forget anybody.
Well, you worked with some audio companies, some other speaker companies as well, I recall.
Pardon me?
You've worked with some speaker manufacturers, some really unique ones over the years. I don't know how current that is, but
yeah, I certainly have worked with Waterfall Audio over the years.
That's what I was thinking.
They're a glass speaker manufacturer out of France, and again, a very unique solution. And so, if I was an integrator, again, I would be talking about that all the time.
Yeah,
because I look at Waterfall Audio, which I have some, you may be able to see in my office here. But those are fantastic speakers. And especially now, as you probably know, Jeremy, there's a lot more interest in better quality audio. And I think, on a little segue, I think that audio has fallen way behind video. So if somebody's building a new house or moving into a new house, there's no way that they're going to buy an old standard def television, right?
Right.
480p. I mean, there's just no way. They're going to buy 1080p or probably 4K. And I think once the consumer hears high resolution audio and better quality audio, there's no way that they would want to listen to compressed audio. And that's why we have double digit growth in turntable sales. Is because people want better quality sound. And with a product like Waterfall Audio, it passes the wife acceptance factor. If I wanted to put some big tower, black wood speakers in my family room, it's probably not going to pass the wife acceptance factor. But the Waterfall Audio speakers are beautiful. And so, yeah, I think that that's a unique solution. And then IC Real Time is another brand I'm extremely proud to be
That's right.
partnered with. I did a lot of research and asked a lot of dealers and distributors and reps who they thought was the best surveillance company, because I thought, that there was a huge opportunity for surveillance internationally. In the U.S., almost every distributor has a surveillance brand, but very few international distributors have a surveillance brand.
Interesting.
And so after my research, I found out that everybody raved about IC Real Time. They absolutely loved IC Real Time. So, this is a little lesson on business development. I did some research. I found out who the CEO was. I sent that person, Matt Saylor, a very carefully worded message on LinkedIn and asked him to connect with me, and said, I think it was, the headline was IC Real Time Global Domination. And I want to help you dominate internationally with IC Real Time. And so Matt responded right away and put me in touch with somebody else on the team. And we kind of, communicated back and forth for about a year and a half. And then eventually they hired me, and now it's going fantastic. So really proud to be working with IC Real Time. And there again, they have an exceptional warranty, 10-year warranty. And they also realized that, they wanted to double down on the quality of care and customer support that they deliver to their dealers and end user customers. And they launched this eye care commitment, which is really pretty remarkable, with a 90-day advanced replacement policy, destroy in field policy for a lot of the products. They can't do it on a $3,000 PTZ camera, but many of the products, they'll allow you to just cut the cord and destroy it in the field, and they'll send you a replacement. And expanded customer service and tech support teams as well, and project planning teams. So yeah, they're really, really proud to be working with them.
So much of what you've done in the past and currently has been international travel and getting in-person meetings. And I can't imagine that the past year and a half with the pandemic, it's been super easy for you. Have you had to adapt to just doing virtual kind of Zoom type calls, Skype calls with your international distributors that you work with, and linking up with your new clients? Have you been able to kind of keep pace with the way things had to adjust?
Yeah, we definitely had to, as the term that's been used a lot, we had to pivot and adapt 100%. So I do definitely miss the in-person meetings. It was great to see you, Jeremy, a couple of weeks ago, and meet in person. That's the first time in, I guess, a year and a half that I've really been in a situation like that, where I've been face to face with dealers and customers. So that was really cool. I certainly miss that, and I miss visiting a lot of the international markets, and I'm desperate to get back out there and support the great channel partners, distributors that I work with, and also the dealers, to see them face to face. In the meantime, we have done a lot of virtual trainings, Tech Bite training series, and I've created a whole new section on my website just dedicated to training and education. So I have great training materials up there. If anybody wants any training or education, even if you're not in my market, you can visit the BIG Corp and look at the resources tab. There's some great materials on the resources tab, and the password is Think Big.
Okay.
And then you can go in, and we probably have 20 or 30 trainings up there now, and we'll continue to do more of that. And it's been a good lesson, I think, for me. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that do even more, produce even more online content. This is a great platform, Jeremy, and I'm really thrilled and grateful that you invited me to be on this platform. and just try and connect with people any way that we can virtually. If you can't do it in person, then you have to find a way to connect virtually. And I would encourage dealers as well, find ways to reach out and connect with your audience. And one thing that I will say is right now, nearly every one of my friends, my neighbors, family members, they all have been doing renovations and updates and home improvements. And I think it's worthy of creating an email blast. I have one that if there's any dealers that want an email blast template, just email me, Pete at the BigCorp.com, and I'll email you an email blast template that I created in this regard, just to help dealers, not for my own benefit. I created it for dealers just as a free tool or gift that says, it's an email blast you can send to your client base that says, thinking about doing any updates, here's some cool new technology from brand X, Y, or Z. You can put in your own content there and invite them to a free virtual consultation session where they can have a phone or iPad or something like that and walk around the house and ask you questions. If they don't want you at their house right now.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
So speaking of in person, we've got Cedia Expo still on the horizon here, coming up September 1st to the 3rd, and notably there have been a lot of cancellations with the big manufacturers. It's been tough. I've been trying to be a great promoter of that show. I think it's so important that we get back in person. And I know that Emerald that runs the show kind of is stuck because they've got to have this thing. They can't cancel, but manufacturers are just so in a tough spot with the continuation of the COVID virus and the Delta variant, and just having to care for their employees, and not have liability there. What's your take on that delicate dance that these manufacturers are having to make? And are you planning to still come to Cedia?
Yeah, well, it's a very good question. I was scheduled to go to Cedia and planned on going. I'm vaccinated. I had COVID back in November, and I'm vaccinated, so I'm not worried about myself. I don't have anybody in my home. It's just my wife and I with a compromised immune system or anything like that. For me, I was okay going there. I wasn't too worried about my safety or anyone in my home. But I do look at it. I saw a post from John Hyman, I think is his name, the CEO of Snap.
Yeah,
and I thought that he was very eloquent.
He was.
And in what he said. He said, "Look, we have to think about the safety of our team and also their families because they may have people with compromised immune systems." And so I will tell you that that I've been vaccinated. My wife has been vaccinated. I had COVID. She never had COVID, but she did get the Delta variant about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, really?
Even after being vaccinated. And so it is a very viral, very contagious version yeah, it is very, very contagious right now. From what I've heard, I'm not a physician, obviously, but from what I've heard, bits and pieces, it isn't as lethal as the other the original COVID-19 pandemic, but or disease, but virus. But it is still very very serious. And so I understand why a lot of companies like Savant pulled out. They had to think about their family, and they had to think about their employees and the employees' family as well, and what's involved with that and the risks that are involved. So I fully understand that. I think I'm just as disappointed or upset as anybody, because I would love to be there, and I'd love to see some of these cool new products that a lot of companies like Savant are coming out with. But I respect their decision
Mm-hmm.
and understand it.
So
So I pulled the plug on Friday and decided that it just wasn't, uh, there wasn't a real driving need for me to go,
okay.
because none of my brands are going to be exhibiting there.
Okay.
And so I decided on Friday just to cancel my plans.
That's unfortunate. Yeah, I
Yeah.
understand that. And not enough there for you're good with your client mix and not looking to prospect or anything like that. It's just not worth that effort.
Yeah, like I said, I think my thoughts on it are, if you feel safe going
Yeah.
there, and you're not worried about someone else on your team, then by all means go.
Right.
And if you have a good reason to go there, for companies that might have 50 to 70 employees that
Oh yeah.
would be involved in that show, that's a whole nother decision that needs to be made. And if there's somebody that is part of the company and they have somebody with a compromised immune system at home, I hope that they'd be respectful and understand if they can't go.
Yeah. Well, it's local for me, so the whole thing's been easier. I initially was a little just we gotten so used to not going to things that all of a sudden there's this new big event, and it's like, am I ready for this in person sort of scenario? And I've been getting warmed up to it, and then everything kind of got switched. But at this point, I'm still planning on being there because it's local. It's I'm in a mask up, which I don't love the idea of having to do for as long as you're out there on the floor. So maybe in and out to the outdoors to cool off and just kind of
Right.
breathe. But I'm just going to try to give a lot of those little companies that may get passed over more attention than I normally could, because the big ones aren't there, and make the best of it. See the friends that show up, and maybe it'll just be a low key kind of weird one-time deal, and we can kind of get back to normal next year. We'll get it finally get back.
Yeah, I mean, I held out for a long time. I really wanted to go, and like I said, I felt safe for myself and my family, but there just wasn't a real need for me to go. So
it makes sense.
I hope you have fun out there and get to see some good faces, and I do think because it's not going to be as busy out there, you'll probably find yourself having some really good, rich conversations, and maybe not as rushed. I know what it's like for you, Jeremy, when you're at a full contingent kind of show, and same for me. Usually for me at a show like Cedia or ISE, Integrated Systems Europe, where you and I have both been in the past, I might have 50 or 60 meetings over the course of 3 days. And it is a real marathon.
It is. It's exhausting for sure.
It is exhausting. Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Well, hey, Pete, thanks so much for joining me today. It's been
my
great
pleasure
catching up more.
Yeah, it's always great to see you, Jeremy. And thank you so much for the opportunity. And I hope that some of the conversations we've shared today are helpful to some of the dealers out there. I just can't stress enough that whole element of trying to differentiate from your competition. And that's what helped me, aside from having just such a fantastic team at RTI and also at CHI, my integration company, and certainly with BIG. I always try to find what are the key benefits that we have to offer with any given brand, and I think about that as well with back in my integration company. Why would somebody want to buy from me versus my competition? And I always went into those meetings thinking I might get one chance to make an impression on this prospective client, and I don't want to screw it up. So I really focused hard on preparing for that meeting with that client and always tried to differentiate from my competition. And I see a lot of dealers now that maybe focus too much on the price. Obviously, you have to respect a budget with a client, but it's not always just about price. There are also benefits and motivators why somebody might want to invest a little bit more money. For instance, with IC Real Time, if you can see better in very dark conditions with their product, it's worth more money to me to be able to see better if there's a bad person, lurking out around my house.
Right.
I want to see that person with the best possible clarity. And so find a way to differentiate from your competition by highlighting some of those great benefits you have to offer. And that's what I did with my integration company. And our revenue doubled every year until the day I sold the company.
Nice.
So, yeah. So thank you so much, Jeremy. I really appreciate it. And stay safe and happy and healthy, everyone out there. And best wishes for a big year ahead.
Absolutely. Pete Baker is managing director of the Baker International Group, otherwise known as the BIG Corp. That wraps up today's show. If you're new to Residential Tech Talks, please subscribe to the weekly podcast and consider rating and reviewing us wherever you listen or watch us. Also, check out all the latest residential tech news at the magazine's website, restechtoday.com, where you can also subscribe to the bi-monthly print or digital magazine and to our Tuesday and Friday email newsletters. Until next time, please stay safe, stay inspired, and let us know if you have a great story to tell.
Residential Tech Talk, lighting specialist, residential tech. Home automation, smart device, home or smart house.